Hello, everyone, and welcome to part one of lesson three, analyzing data and preparing a research project. For an overview of lesson three, we will cover tools to organize data and interpreting your results, and then we'll talk about creating your research report. And for a quick recap of lessons one and two, we have learned how to use the scientific method, different types of research methods such as field, policy, experimental, as well as differentiating between quantitative and qualitative data and the different collection methods such as survey, measurements, and interviews. How to make sure our data and research is credible. So, it's very important to know how to organize your data. Before you analyze it, it's helpful to organize it into productive ways. For example, let's look at this hypothetical data set. Imagine these are test scores from Dr. Duke's students in the Intro to Research and Ag class. These names are organized in alphabetical order with their test scores right next to them, easy to analyze. When you organize your data, it's easy to understand what the results mean, identify trends, find patterns, and correlations. So, if we take the data and lay it out in horizontally with the gender, we might notice something. The lowest scores from a boy and the highest scores from a girl. So, organizing this data allowed us to find a pattern in the test scores. There are many different ways to organize your data. It's important to organize it in whatever way is going to help you find the trends and patterns of your data so you can start thinking about what your data actually means. So, if we separated the data into two tables alphabetically by name, it would look like this on the left, and if we make a scatter plot of the boy and girl scores, it would look like this on the right. These are just two examples of some ways to organize your data. Now, let's talk about some tools for organizing data. It's important to choose the correct tools that work best for your specific data set. This will help your audience to better be able to interpret your results and make them more meaningful. So, some tools for organizing your data would be Excel spreadsheets, bar charts and pie charts, graphs, and tables, as well as graphical images. Now that we have learned about organizing our data, let's learn how to interpret our data. To properly analyze your research data, you must go through three steps. The first one, cleaning. Once you have the necessary data, it's time to clean it and leave it ready for analysis. Not all the data you collect will be useful, so when collecting big amounts of information in different formats, it's very likely that you will find yourself with a duplicate or badly formatted data. To avoid this, before you start working with your data, you need to make sure to erase any white spaces, duplicate records, or formatting errors. This way, you avoid hurting your analysis with incorrect data. Step 2 is analyzing your data. With the help of various techniques such as statistical analysis regressions, text analysis, and more, you can start analyzing and manipulating your data to extract relevant conclusions. At this stage, this should be where you find trends, correlations, and variations, and patterns that can help you answer the questions you first thought of in the identify stage. Various technologies in the market assist researchers and average business users with the management of data. Some of them include business intelligence and visualization software, predictive analytics, and data mining, among others. The last step, but certainly not the least, you have one of the most important parts. It's time to interpret your results. This stage is where the researcher comes up with courses of action based on the findings. For example, here you would start to understand if your clients prefer packaging that is red or green, plastic or paper, etc. Additionally, this is the stage that you can find some limitations and work on them. Now let's get into types of data analysis. There are many methods of data analysis, but we'll talk about a few of the most common ones. Within these types of data analysis, you can use different analysis methods like regressional analysis, factor analysis, neural networks, data mining, and decision trees, and more. So, for descriptive analysis, what happened. It means the descriptive analysis method is the starting point to any analytical reflection, and it aims to answer the question of what happened. It does this by ordering, manipulating, and interpreting raw data from various sources to turn it into valuable insights for your organization. Performing descriptive analysis is essential as it allows us to present our insight in a meaningful way. Although it is relevant to mention that this analysis on its own will not allow you to predict future outcomes or tell the answer to questions like why something happened. It will leave your data organized and ready to conduct further investigation. Diagnostic analysis shows why it happened. Diagnostic data analytics empowers analysts and executives by helping them gain a firm contextual understanding of why something happened. If you know why something happened as well as how it happened, you might be able to pinpoint the exact ways of tackling the issue or challenge. Designed to provide direct and actionable answers to specific questions, this is one of the world's most important methods in research among its other key organizations, such as retail analytics and more. And lastly, predictive analysis. This is showing what will happen. The predictive method allows you to look into the future and answer the question, what will happen? In order to do this, it uses the results of the previously mentioned descriptive, exploratory, and diagnostic analysis, in addition to machine learning and artificial intelligence. Like this, you can uncover future trends, potential problems, or inefficiencies, connections, and casualties in your data. With predictive analysis, you can unfold and develop initiatives that will not only enhance your various operational process, but also help you gain an all-important edge on the competition. If you understand why a trend or pattern or event happened through data, you will then be able to develop an informed projection of how things may unfold in particular areas of business. Now, let's use an example data set to analyze. Let's imagine that the students in Dr. Anderson's welding class are taking their final welding exam. Half of the class trained using the live VR welding machine, and the other half only used the live welding machine. This table shows the final exam scores for the two groups of students. A good way to organize this data would be into a chart or graph to help us visualize the difference between the group scores. We can identify trends and draw conclusions from the research. So for our example, we can see that the students in Group 2 had much lower test scores. So what can we find from this data? We can see that the students in Group 1 that used live VR training had generally higher exam scores than the students in Group 2. So what can we find from this data? We can see that the students in Group 1 that used live and VR training had generally higher exam scores than the students in Group 2 that only used live training. So we can conclude a few things from this. We can conclude that maybe the live and VR training combo is better for training students in general, and maybe the live training was more challenging for students, but also maybe that the live training students had less experience. We should have collected data to know for sure. When interpreting your research data, you cannot make assumptions, you can only make statements that the data supports, evidence-based conclusions. All of these things are things you have to consider when thinking about your research results. You can only make conclusions that are supported by the results. This completes the end of part 1 of lesson 3. In part 2, we'll go over creating your research report. See you then.